everyone, I'm Hewett, an Executive Managing Partner at ChiuGroup, and today we're talking about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's social entrepreneurship. I live and breathe every single day as a social entrepreneur, but what exactly does that mean? Well, that's part of the reason why I find this topic so interesting, because there is no one formal agreed upon definition of social entrepreneurship as of yet. If we were to try to find a definition, we can go back as far as the 1930s. In about 1934, a Harvard economist, a very famed economist actually, by the name of Joseph Schumpeter, defined traditional entrepreneurship as innovation, as creating a particular need. Right? So that's half of the social entrepreneurship term. That's what entrepreneurship itself is. At the turn of the century, in around 2000, an English strategist by the name of John Thompson defined a social entrepreneur as someone who fills in a need not met by the welfare state, and the fact that social entrepreneurship includes an emotional component. And then, about a decade later, in 2009, a public administrator by the name of Peter Brinkerhoff defines social entrepreneur as someone who takes a risk on behalf of the public he or she serves. So if you were to ask me what social entrepreneurship is, I would say that it's recognizing a social need, developing a solution, operationalizing that solution, and then sustaining and spreading that solution. So I want to first start off with the story of Miranda. She was recently rushed into the emergency room because of pneumonia. But after further examination, it turns out that she actually had terminal stage cancer. But she was very hesitant to go to the hospital because when she's about to lose her life, that's what she's afraid of. And to her, the hospital is sort of that place where people go to lose their life. And even more so, it's because of the fact that she's an immigrant and she's afraid of being mistreated in the hospital. Now, this is a serious social concern, and particularly for me, it's a concern that I saw firsthand over and over again. And that's what made me want to take action as a social entrepreneur. So that's my story for heading into this realm. Now, when you've decided that you have a similar social concern, or maybe a different social concern that you want to address, then we have to talk about specifics and we have to talk about what can we actually do. And that's where the different legal structures of social entrepreneurship ventures come into play. So let's say again that you came across a situation, you saw a need, and you want to make a difference. How can you do that? Well, you first need to consider the legal form of organization, which provides the vehicle for you to carry out your work. On one end of the spectrum is the traditional for-profit corporation with a CSR program. A CSR program is otherwise known as a corporate social responsibility program. Whether that means it's a company-sponsored foundation for grant making, an employee matching funds program, an employee volunteer program, a pro bono program, or a combination of any of these. Or it could just be a culture of adhering to the what's known as the triple bottom line in a for-profit corporation. But some argue that these are economically inefficient because they present a principal-agent problem. The idea is that the management or the board is making decisions on how to give away money and value from the company based on their own interests. But this money and value actually belongs to and comes from the shareholders. While the shareholders' interests may not particularly align with those philanthropic values. So then we have the other end of the spectrum, which is the not-for-profit organizations, where there are no shareholders but members that represent the community the charity was formed to serve. All decisions are made solely based on whether it advances the social mission of the organization and not in shareholders' interest because there are no shareholders. It also doesn't mean the fact that the nonprofit doesn't pursue profits. A nonprofit certainly strives to produce a surplus that it can plow back into its programs. And then in between are some new forms of business organization that cropped up due to the rise of social entrepreneurship. These are a pretty big deal since the last major legal form created here in the United States was the LLP, the Limited Liability Partnership, back in 1991. These forms legally allow entrepreneurs to pursue social pursuits rather than just maximize shareholder wealth. So we have the L3C, which is the Low Profit Limited Liability Company, and the Benefit Corporation, which is a corporate form based on the traditional C-Corp. L3Cs are less widely spreading, but benefit corporation legislations are becoming increasingly popular in many states. You should check with your state to see which forms you are allowed to incorporate. Now, probably the most significant difference among these forms is the process of management decision-making. Much of decision-making in a traditional business is based on advancing the interests of shareholders and maximizing equity holders' value. I mean, even common law from the Delaware Chancery Court, which is the forum that hears a lot of corporation disputes in the United States, has clearly placed the fiduciary duties of board members to increase shareholder value. However, the L3C, the Benefit Corporation, and certainly the Not-for-Profit Corporation, in those forms, we look more at characteristics such as mission fit, social value, program outcomes, classifications of net assets, and stakeholder groups rather than just shareholders and profits. Obviously, much of the decision-making does depend on overcoming challenges to effectively running the organization. I'm going to speak from the perspective more of a nonprofit venture, drawing from my own experience, but many of the principles I talk about will apply to any social impact enterprise. So probably the three biggest challenges to running a nonprofit, or any social enterprise for that matter nowadays, is money, and you guessed it, money. Nonprofits are particularly difficult since they can't raise capital using equity like L3Cs, benefit corporations, and other traditional business structures can. So to successfully realize the dream of changing the world, you need to raise the funds to prove the business case for your social impact venture. It's hard since many social impact projects don't realize immediate results and they're risky. So don't just sell a product or service and realize immediate gains in revenue. Right? That's not what you're doing. In healthcare, for example, your products are living, breathing human beings. I mean, they're you and me. Healthcare outcomes take months and sometimes even decades to track. So to do this, three things to use to your advantage are the venture's mission, the venture's vision, and clearly defining the venture's theory of change. So the mission is the reason for being. Funders, volunteers, resource partners, supporters, the IRS, the state attorney general, they all look to your mission statement to see what exactly it is that you're trying to do. What is the social change you're trying to achieve through the venture? Time and time again, whenever you're faced with a decision, you will need to ask whether it fits within the scope of your mission. The vision is your ability to articulate how the world will be different after you're successfully done with your work. This is painting the picture bright enough for funders, volunteers, supporters, and advocates to want to be a part of your journey. This is the end product that you're selling them on. And now the theory of change. So the theory of change is also referred to as somewhat of a logic model. They're actually two different things, but you may have heard of it as a logic model. So when I do strategic planning with our clients, with the nonprofits and the board and the management teams that I work with, a logic model in real life looks something like this. This is actually a real-life logic model that I developed with one of the nonprofits that I work with. And as you can see, it could be very messy, but what it does is it relates the resources that we put into our venture to the overall impact that we're having. So it defines a strategy of how through our mission we are approaching our vision. Now, why don't we simplify this so it's a little easier to read? So the first part is the inputs. These are the resources. So obviously, funding, is a big one, but do not discount the human resources as well. It's so important to have the right team members and colleagues who possess the required skills and can motivate and support each other throughout the startup process, because it's really through your human resources that you can successfully execute your strategy and realize your vision. Resources allow you to carry out your programs. So programs are clearly defined activities that form the venture's programming. these are your operations. Your operations will produce outputs. Outputs track what each activity of the venture will spit out. For example, number of students mentored, number of patients seen, number of trees saved, and so forth. Outputs have outcomes. Outcomes are, answering the question of what will be the visible short and middle term change that we can see in our programs, and the fact that our activities, what effect will they have on our outputs. And then the outcomes eventually lead to impact. So over the long term, as we aggregate the outcomes from each of the outputs, what will be the macro large-scale effect of our ventures programs? So the real idea with defining strategy of your social venture is to have a realistic, sensible relationship of what impact your inputs can drive. It follows the same idea in a business of taking something of limited value and transforming that into something else many times more valuable. Except in social entrepreneurship, we can't always define the value of impact in dollar signs, and not in terms of wealth for investors who gave us their money, since some of them do it based on philanthropic motivations. The real fun is for you to find out how your own unique way of defining your social impact value is. Now, as always with all of our videos, we want to give a sort of a be careful, slide of some cautions for you to pay attention to. And these are sort of like real life lessons learned from our own experiences and our clients' experiences as we've gone through the process. So hopefully you won't have to go through the same challenges and, make the same mistakes that have already been made. The first is to really think through your corporate structure, right? So if you want to incorporate a nonprofit, make sure that you're really doing it because of the right reasons. Nonprofits come with a lot of responsibility. You can check out a lot of our other videos that talk about the specifics of nonprofit theory, of nonprofit terminology, tax exemption, and all of that. But once you incorporate a nonprofit, you will be subject to a lot of scrutiny by the public and by various different government agencies. So make sure that it truly is what you're trying to do. Maybe you can accomplish your goals by looking at a different corporate entity, like a benefit corporation, for example. The next be careful is to be careful of properly conveying your social impact. So really think through, at the end of the day, what is the overall large-scale impact that you're having? We just went through this theory of change and talking about the logic model. And with this, be careful of what you're describing as your outputs versus your outcomes and what it is that your eventual overall impact is. A lot of individuals, when they first start out, make the confusion between describing their outputs as the impact when they're actually not. So make sure that your impact is what your mission originally is supposed to be. And talking about mission, the last item to be careful of is mission creep. What we mean by that is many individuals, when they first develop a venture, they have this, great idea, oh, I want to do this to help the world. And then eventually, as they go on in their venture, they pursue various different forms of growing the organization. Like, for example, there's a funding opportunity that's, to go down this route. But when they first developed the organization, they were actually planning to go down another route. And so that's what mission creep is. It's creeping the mission. It's sort of like adjusting the mission to adhere to whatever different opportunities are to help grow the organization, like this new funding opportunity, when that's not the actual original mission of the organization. And mission creep can lead many social entrepreneurs down a very slippery slope because, as we mentioned before, a lot of different stakeholders look to your individual and your original mission statement in order to understand and in order to support the organization or to regulate the organization. And once you start performing activities and actually taking initiatives and clear tasks and efforts that are outside of the mission, that raises a lot of questions about, where you're headed in the future. I just want to end with this thought. Robert F. Wagner, who's a former 3-term mayor of New York City, once said, "Public service is the highest good, and when done honorably and well, the most rewarding." I truly hope that what we discussed in this video will inspire you to pursue public service through social entrepreneurship and define what the highest good means to you individually. So thank you very much for sticking around for the entirety of this video. If you have any questions, this is my contact information. Please feel free to email me or to give me a call with any specifics that you'd like to discuss from the video. And remember, if this is your first time here, please like the video, please subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment. I'd love to talk with you and to continue the conversation outside of this video. So thanks very much for watching.